Okay, let's unpack this. You handed us a whole stack of sources, news reports, notes, basically. And it's all focused on this, well, really intriguing situation brewing down in Jacksonville with the Jaguars.
Yeah, especially now, right? We're getting into the thick of 2025 OTAs.
Exactly. And, this time of year in the NFL, it can feel a bit quiet, on the surface anyway.
Yeah.
Lots of draft pick talk, veteran contracts, that kind of stuff.
Sure, that dominates the headlines, but underneath, on the practice field, that's where you start hearing whispers. Stories start to bubble up.
Yeah, absolutely. And OTAs, these organized team activities, they're really the first chance teams get a structured look at the whole roster together, rookies included.
That's right. And for your big draft picks, your first rounders, it's often about just getting them settled, making sure they look the part, confirming what you thought.
Good for the other guys.
Exactly. For the players who maybe weren't drafted or drafted late, this is it. This is their critical first impression. It's make or break time to even get noticed.
It's where the unknowns start trying to make a name for themselves.
That's the window.
And that seems to be precisely what's happening in Jacksonville, at least according to all this material you've shared with us. Well, yeah, a lot of the spotlight is on one massive new arrival.
Understandably so.
There's this other player, kind of unexpected, based on the reports, who's really forcing people to, turn their heads.
Indeed. Our sources, they really highlight the emergence of this undrafted rookie wide receiver, a guy named Eli Pank.
Eli Pank.
Okay.
Not exactly a household name coming out of the draft process.
Not at all. But the reports we have, they suggest he's doing some seriously impressive things out there during these early practices.
Okay, so that's our mission for this Deep Dive then. We're going to dig strictly, and I mean only, into the source material you provided. We want to unpack Eli Pank's story, his background.
Right.
Figure out what these reports are actually saying about his performance right now in Jacksonville.
In these OTAs, yeah.
And then explore what this unexpected rise could actually mean. For him, obviously, but also for the Jaguars as they piece together their offense for 2025.
We're just laying out what the sources tell us, connecting those dots, see what picture emerges.
And it kicks off with a really interesting contradiction, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The sources point this out right away.
They do. It's fascinating. On one hand, the sources say Pank entered the league, and I'm quoting here, without high expectations.
Right. Which makes sense for an undrafted guy.
Yeah.
They're all long shots, pretty much by definition.
Exactly. But then, almost in the next breath, the sources drop this key piece of info about his past. Despite those low expectations now,
Yeah.
he was, in fact, a former four-star recruit, a guy who, again, quoting, has been on scouts' radars for years.
Whoa. Okay, hold on. Four-star recruit on scouts' radars for years,
Yeah.
but enters the league undrafted with low expectations.
Big disconnect, right. The sources make sure to flag that immediately. It grabs your attention.
It absolutely does. It sets the hook. You immediately think, okay, how does that happen? How does someone once seen as a top prospect, someone scouts tracked, end up slipping through the cracks completely in the draft?
There's definitely a story there. And the sources, thankfully, give us the pieces to start putting it together.
But before we dive into the why behind his path, let's set the scene in Jacksonville first. What's the context he's walking into? That's kind of our first big area based on these reports.
Absolutely. Setting the stage, understanding the environment in Jacksonville is crucial. The sources paint a pretty clear picture.
Okay, so what do they say? Looking at the Jags 2025 rookie class, the initial buzz...
It's all about one guy.
Travis Hunter.
Yeah.
Right. The sources hammer this point. Reigning Heisman winner, totally unique talent. He is, and the source says this specifically, the center of the team's media attention.
Everything revolves around him initially. How does he fit? What can he do? Massive spotlight.
So that's the backdrop. Total superstar rookie arrival dominating the headlines.
Creates a very specific dynamic. All eyes on the big name.
But then the sources pivot pretty quickly. They introduce this counter-narrative. Something else is happening besides the Hunter hype.
Exactly. They explicitly state that despite all that attention on Hunter, several other debutants have stood out in the Jaguars' rookie minicamp and OTAs.
Okay, debutantes. So other newcomers are making noise too, even if the cameras are pointed elsewhere.
Performance on the field doesn't always follow the media script, right? Things are happening in these early practices that are worth noting.
And among those other debutantes who are standing out?
The sources specifically point to undrafted wideout Eli Pank.
Here he is again.
Yeah.
So the rookie class, headlined by maybe the biggest name in college football, the sources are telling us an undrafted guy someone who came in with zero draft capital, basically no expectations.
Yeah.
He's one of the few really grabbing attention in these important early sessions.
Immediately makes you lean in, right? What's he doing?
And the why behind a receiver potentially standing out is important too. What's the situation at that position for the Jags? The sources detail this. They say the team lacks depth behind the established players.
Okay, so who are the established guys, according to the reports?
Brian Thomas Jr. is one. He apparently really broke out in 2024, proved himself.
Yeah, he had a strong rookie year.
And now, obviously, Travis Hunter, who they expect to be a major focus right away.
So you've got Thomas Jr. and Hunter as your likely top two options, but behind them...
The sources say there's a lack of depth, a bit of a question mark.
Identifying that lack of depth is really key context. It tells you the team knew they had a need there going into the offseason. Even with landing Hunter, they might still feel thin behind those top two.
And the sources show just how aware the team was and maybe how determined they were to find some answers, even after the draft. They report Jacksonville subsequently signed 6 undrafted free agent wideouts coming out of the draft.
6?
Wow. 6 UDFAs at one position.
That's a significant number. That's not just filling out the 90-man roster. That's basically throwing a very wide net.
Yeah, the sources say they did this in hopes that a few would stand out above the rest. Like, let's bring in a bunch and see who sinks or swims.
It screams competition.
Yeah.
It signals they either didn't get all the receiver depth they wanted in the draft itself, beyond Hunter, obviously, or they just really wanted to foster a dogfight for those last few roster spots at receiver.
Creates an intense environment right from day one for those 6 guys. They know they're all fighting for maybe 1, maybe 2 spots, if they're lucky.
Absolutely. And the sources, they specifically single out Pank from that group. They say he seized the opportunity early in minicamp and has continued the momentum in OTAs.
So out of this pool of 6 long shots brought in specifically to compete for those depth roles, Pank is the one, based on these reports, who's made the strong early impression and, crucially, kept it going from rookie camp into the full team practices.
That's the first real signal from the sources that, okay, something noteworthy might be happening with this particular player. He's separating himself.
Now, let's circle back to that hook from the beginning. That contradiction the sources highlighted. Low expectations now, but a high-profile recruit in the past.
Wait, the 4-star recruit thing.
The sources explain why that disconnect exists. They get into his college journey, and specifically, the huge roadblocks he hit.
Yeah, this is where the story gets pretty tough, based on what we're reading here. Pank spent 5 years at Duke. That's a long college career.
5 years is substantial.
But the sources note that despite all that time, he had, quote, just one successful season.
One successful season in 5 years. That immediately tells you something didn't go according to plan. Not the trajectory you'd expect for a former top recruit.
Definitely not. And the sources are very explicit about why his college career got so sidetracked.
Let me guess. Injuries.
Bingo. The primary factor, according to these reports, was his injury history. And it wasn't minor stuff, it was severe and consecutive.
Okay, lay it out. What happened?
The sources detail he broke his left ankle in 2022.
Ouch.
He managed to battle back for that one. But then the very next year, 2023, he broke his right ankle.
Oh, man. Left ankle 1 year, right ankle the next?
Yeah. Brutal. Just absolutely brutal for any athlete, but especially a wide receiver. Think about it. Footwork, cutting, jumping, landing. It's everything.
The sources call them consecutive devastating lower leg injuries. That feels appropriate.
It really does. It's a massive physical hurdle, obviously, but you have to imagine the mental toll, too. Going through that recovery process twice, back to back.
And the reports emphasize how hard that recovery was. They say recovering from 2 devastating lower leg injuries was anything but easy.
It underlines the struggle. This wasn't just missing a few games. This was major reconstruction, long rehabs, and probably a lot of doubt about whether he could ever get back to where he was.
Injuries like that, they don't just cost you playing time. They cost you development time, right? Building chemistry with quarterbacks, refining your skills.
Absolutely. You lose critical reps, you lose consistency, and for a guy needing to impress scouts for the draft, losing basically 2 full seasons to severe ankle breaks, that's incredibly damaging to your stock.
So he battles back again. The sources say he did return for his 5th-year senior season in 2024.
He did.
And the phrasing the sources use is interesting. They say he finally got his day in court.
Day in court. What do you think that implies?
It sounds like, after all the setbacks, the lost time, the grueling recovery, 2024 was his shot. Maybe his last real shot in college to prove he was healthy and could still play at a high level.
Yeah, it frames that season as make or break, a chance for redemption, to show that four-star potential was still there under the surface, buried by the injuries.
And did he show it? What did the sources say about his 2024 season?
They indicate he definitely made the most of that chance. The stats they provide: he hauled in a team-high 60 catches for 798 receiving yards.
Okay, team high 60 catches, nearly 800 yards. That's pretty solid production.
Very respectable numbers, especially considering what he'd just been through. To come back from 2 broken ankles and lead your team in receptions, that shows incredible recovery, resilience, effectiveness.
It really does. 60 catches is a good number, shows reliability. Almost 800 yards is pushing towards that 1,000-yard mark people talk about.
And the fact that he did it after those injuries is what makes it stand out in the reports.
The sources also talk about his role in the offense that year. They say he established himself as one of Malik Murphy's preferred targets.
Preferred target.
Yeah.
That means more than just catching passes that happen to come his way, right?
Yeah, it suggests trust. Like when the QB needed a play, maybe on third down or in a clutch moment, he looked for Pank.
That trust comes from reliability. Good hands, running the right routes, being where you're supposed to be, maybe winning contested catches. It implies he had those skills, even after battling back from injury. He wasn't just a guy running routes. He was dependable.
And his performance mattered for the team, too. The sources mentioned Duke had a surprising 9-3 finish that season.
Surprising, okay. So that maybe outperformed expectations.
And Pank was a major factor in that success, according to the reports.
So it wasn't just empty stats. His production helped the team win games. That adds another layer of value. He had a tangible impact on a winning season.
Now, let's tie this all back to why he went undrafted. The sources connect the dots very clearly here, especially regarding those injuries.
What's their main assertion?
They state, pretty bluntly, most believe that Pank would have been a priority draft pick had he not suffered consecutive serious ankle injuries to derail his collegiate career.
Wow. Okay, so that's the explanation from the sources. They're pinning his fall from priority draft pick status directly onto those back-to-back ankle breaks.
Yeah. The underlying talent, the 4-star potential, they suggest it was still there. But the injury history, the durability concerns, that just scared NFL teams off during the draft.
Makes sense. 2 major lower leg injuries in 2 years. That's a massive red flag for any team investing a draft pick. The risk of re-injury or just not being the same player, it's high.
And the sources capture the fallout from that fear among scouts. They note that after those injuries, many wrote him off by that point.
That's the brutal reality of evaluation, isn't it? Once those big injury flags pop up, especially repeatedly, teams often just move on. They focus on players with cleaner bills of health. The perceived risk just becomes too great.
So his path to the NFL wasn't the smooth ride maybe envisioned when he was a top recruit. The sources say his journey was extended longer than he had hoped because of the injuries.
He didn't get drafted high, didn't maybe even get drafted at all. He had to fight back, prove himself again in that senior year, and then enter the league the hard way.
Through undrafted free agency, a much tougher, much less certain path.
Which, of course, makes what he's reportedly doing now in Jacksonville even more compelling. He took that long, hard road and is now grabbing an opportunity he had to really battle just to get.
Okay, so that brings us right up to the present. What are the latest reports saying? What's happening with Eli Pank right now at these 2025 Jaguars OTAs?
The sources are pretty direct in their assessment of how he's looking so far. They state, since gracing the practice field, Pank has been nothing but impressive.
Nothing but impressive.
Yeah.
That's strong language. Not just good, not showing flashes, but consistently impressive.
It suggests it's not just one good day or one highlight catch. It's a pattern. He's stacking good days, making positive plays consistently during these workouts.
And maybe the biggest positive note, considering his history. What about the ankles? How's he moving?
This is probably the most crucial update from the sources. They report, the ankle injuries appear to be a thing of the past as he has been nothing but quick and explosive.
Wow. Appear to be a thing of the past. If that holds up, that's huge.
Potentially game-changing for him. Remember, the sources explicitly blamed those injuries for his draft slide. If he's now moving well, showing that quickness, that explosiveness, without any apparent issues,
it means he might have finally fully recovered the physical tools he needs to compete at this level. The tools that were likely compromised during those injury-plagued college years.
It removes, at least for now, the biggest question mark, the biggest red flag that caused teams to, as the sources said, write him off.
Do the sources offer any specifics on his speed or athleticism?
They do mention one data point, his unofficial 40-yard dash time from Duke's Pro Day. According to the Draft Network via the sources, he ran a 4.33.
4.33. Okay, that's blazing fast. That's elite speed.
Absolutely. Top-tier speed for a receiver, or really any position. And crucially, the sources note that this speed has been as advertised at the Jaguars' OTAs.
So it's not just a track time. He's actually playing that fast on the football field.
That's what the reports suggest. He's showing functional speed, using it in routes, making plays because of that speed. That kind of speed is a weapon defenses always have to account for.
But is it just about speed? Because sometimes you get track guys who can't really play football.
That's a fair point, and the sources address it directly. They're quick to point out he's proven to be more than speed. They say he's been making eye-opening plays each day.
More than speed,
Yep.
eye-opening plays. What does that suggest to you?
It suggests he's showing the skills of a receiver, not just the raw athleticism. Things like, route running, getting separation, catching the ball reliably, body control, maybe even understanding coverages. The stuff that lets you actually use your speed effectively.
So he's not just running go routes, he's flashing actual playmaking ability.
That seems to be the implication from the sources. He's making things happen, not just running fast in a straight line.
Okay, but these are OTAs. No pads, right? The sources mention that caveat.
They do, and it's an important one. They explicitly note, without pads, the physicality of his slight frame has yet to be tested.
The slide frame. Okay, so we know he's fast, he's making plays now, but how does he hold up when things get physical?
That's the next big question. OTAs are great for evaluating speed, routes, hands, but you can't really see how a guy handles press coverage, how he fights for the ball in traffic, how he takes a hit over the middle, or how he blocks.
Especially for a receiver described as having a slight frame. Training camp, when the pads come on, that's going to be a huge test for him.
Absolutely. That's where we'll see if he can handle the physical grind of the NFL. But despite that necessary caveat,
Yeah.
the sources reinforce the positive buzz by bringing in observations from a reporter who's there every day. Sports Illustrated's John Shipley.
Okay, a beat writer. Someone watching closely. What does Shipley say?
Shipley apparently confirms the general sentiment, noting Pank continues to look both athletic and impressive during these OTAs.
That carries weight, right? Coming from someone whose job it is to watch, practice, and evaluate these guys day in, day out.
Definitely lends credibility beyond just general buzz.
Yeah.
And the sources give us some direct quotes or paraphrases of Shipley's specific impressions.
Oh, good. Like what's Shipley seeing that makes him stand out?
Well, Shipley's main takeaway, according to the sources, is that Pank is a playmaker.
Playmaker, that's a word coaches love to hear.
It really is. It means he's not just doing his job, he's creating positive plays, turning a short pass into a big gain, making a tough catch, finding ways to impact the game. It suggests he has that knack for making things happen.
Does Shipley mention the no pads thing too?
He does. The sources say Shipley includes that same important caveat, gotta see it carry over when the hitting starts. Acknowledges the limits of OTAs.
Okay, standard disclaimer.
Mm-hmm.
But what else did he observe positively?
He apparently said Pank has made a handful of plays in each practice that have impressed, and Thursday was no different.
Handful of plays each practice. That points to consistency again.
Exactly. It's not just one flash in the pan. He's consistently showing up day after day, making plays that catch the eye. That's how you build momentum and get noticed by the coaching staff.
Did Shipley give any specific examples of these plays?
Yes, the sources mention one specifically. Shipley reported Pank made one of the best plays of the day with an athletic catch on the left sideline.
Athletic catch on the sideline. What does that usually involve?
Could be a lot of things. Adjusting to a poorly thrown ball, high-pointing it, dragging the toes to stay in bounds, contorting his body, basically making a difficult catch that requires more than just routine effort.
Making the tough plays, that separates guys. And being called one of the best plays of the day, that really backs up the playmaker label.
It does. It suggests he has those ball skills and body control, not just the speed.
Any other specific observations from Shipley mentioned?
Yeah, one more key detail. Shipley also noted Pank has also had several big gains over the middle of the field.
Okay, work in the middle. Why is that significant?
A few reasons. One, it shows toughness, or at least a willingness to go into traffic where hits might be coming. Two, it usually requires good route running to find open spaces against zone or beat man coverage quickly.
And for the offense, having someone who can win over the middle.
Is huge. It gives the quarterback, Trevor Lawrence in this case, A reliable option to move the chains, especially against certain defensive looks. It can open up things on the outside, too. It might even hint at a potential role for him, maybe in the slot or on crossing routes.
So based on all this, the consistency, the athletic plays, the sideline catches, working the middle, what was Shipley's overall conclusion at this stage?
His early conclusion, as reported by the sources, is this. It is very, very early, but it feels safe to say his stock is pointing up right now.
Stock is pointing up. That's the key phrase, right?
That's the money quote. He's acknowledging it's June, pads aren't on, lots of football still to be played, but based only on what's been observable so far in OTAs, the trend for Pank is undeniably positive.
And for an undrafted guy who came in with low expectations, having your stock pointing up this early is exactly what you need. It earns you more reps, more looks, keeps you in the conversation.
It's the first hurdle cleared, and cleared impressively, according to these reports.
Okay, so we've got the background, the injury nightmare, the comeback senior year, and now this really impressive start in Jacksonville. Let's shift now, like the sources do, to thinking about where he might actually fit. If he keeps this up, where does a guy like this slot into the Jaguars' offense?
Yeah, the sources connect his individual performance back to the bigger picture for the team.
Right. They reiterate that point about Travis Hunter soaking up the media attention.
The main spotlight.
But Pank is, quote, forcing people to face his direction. His play is just demanding attention, even if he wasn't the guy everyone was talking about initially.
He's basically writing his own story with his performance, making himself relevant despite the circumstances.
And the sources frame this within the context of the Jaguars trying to really boost their offense in 2025. They mentioned the new head coach, Liam Cohen.
Cohen's arrival is significant. The sources state he was hired specifically to get the most out of quarterback Trevor Lawrence.
Maximize the franchise QB. That's the goal.
And a big part of doing that is surrounding him with weapons, reliable targets, playmakers.
And the reports suggest Pank is, quote, slowly convincing the team that he needs to be a part of it, part of that Cohen offense, part of helping Lawrence succeed.
If he's impressing this much early on, he's essentially auditioning for a role in that revamped offense. He's showing Cohen and the staff, hey, I can help you guys win. I can be one of those reliable weapons for Lawrence.
So who are the established weapons already there, according to the sources?
Well, first and foremost, Trevor Lawrence himself. Entering his 5th year, the sources note the team made a big financial commitment to him in the 2024 offseason. He's the guy.
Locked in as the centerpiece. Makes sense.
Then at receiver, you have Brian Thomas Jr. The sources call him an elite wideout, based on his rookie season, someone worthy of building an offense around.
So a legit number 1 or at least 1A type, big outside threat.
Seems like it. And then you add Travis Hunter, who they expect to complement Thomas, another dynamic piece.
So Thomas Jr. and Hunter, that's your projected starting duo, likely. Powerful combination on paper.
That seems to be the foundation. But then the question becomes, who's next? Who's the number 3? Who provides the depth?
And this is where the sources drop that really intriguing line about Pank's potential value. They say the team might have found an even more valuable depth piece in Pank.
Even more valuable. What does that suggest? Compared to what?
Well, maybe compared to what they expected from any of the UDFAs they brought in. Or maybe even compared to some of the other guys already competing for those depth spots.
It implies he's exceeding expectations significantly. That he's not just looking like a potential roster filler, but someone who could actually add significant value beyond just being a backup, maybe bring an element they didn't realize they were getting.
The sources then detail who else is in that mix, competing for targets and roster spots behind Thomas and Hunter. This is Pank's direct competition.
Okay, who's listed?
They mentioned Dyami Brown. He was apparently signed as a potential 3rd target.
Okay, so veteran brought in specifically with that WR3 role in mind. That's stiff competition right there.
Then there's Parker Washington. He's mentioned as presenting himself as an option, maybe someone already on the roster looking to step up.
Another body in the competition.
And Austin Trammell. He's described as a former undrafted free agent fighting for the same job.
Ah, so Trammell is interesting. He's someone who successfully navigated that same UDFA path Cancola's on now. He's trying to hold his ground.
Right. It shows there's a real battle shaping up. Veterans, younger guys, other UDFAs, all fighting for what are probably only 1 or 2 key roles behind the top dogs.
A crowded room.
And the sources state the obvious but necessary point. Nothing will be decided until training camp. We're still in June. OTAs are just the start.
Absolutely. The real decisions come later.
But crucially, the sources follow that up by saying Pank is quickly inserting himself into that conversation.
So he's not on the outside looking in. He's not just a camp body anymore, based on these reports. He's forced his way into the discussion alongside guys like Brown, Washington, Trammell for those important depth receiver spots.
All based on what he's shown in these early padless practices. He's turned heads enough to be considered a legitimate contender already.
That's a significant early win for an undrafted player.
The sources also briefly touch on other parts of the offense. They mention the O-line getting bolstered by signing Robert Hainsey and Patrick McCarty.
Got to protect the QB, foundational stuff.
And they throw in a line that the backfield situation is still a mess.
If the running game is uncertain.
That potentially puts even more emphasis on the passing game.
Yeah.
Making reliable receivers even more critical.
Could be. If you can't lean on the run, you need your QB and receivers to carry the load. That context definitely makes finding good receiving depth more important.
So pulling it all together, new coach, investment in Lawrence, weapons like Thomas Jr. and Hunter, trying to fix the line, maybe issues in the backfield. The sources say the big picture, hope is for the pieces to finally fall into place in 2025 so the offense can take a significant leap.
They're looking for a breakout year offensively.
And here's the direct connection to Pankol's emergence. The sources state, finding a true Node 3 target would tie the pieces together. And then they say Pankol is the player standing out early in the process for that role.
Wow. Okay, so they're not just saying he's competing for a roster spot. They're suggesting he's the early leader or the most impressive candidate, showing potential to be that crucial third target.
That's what it sounds like. That a reliable WR3 is seen as the missing link to really unlock the offense's potential.
Preventing defenses from just keying on Thomas and Hunter.
Giving Lawrence another trusted option.
Tim Pankol is the guy flashing the potential to be that missing link based on these initial OTA performances.
That elevates his potential impact way beyond just being the 5th or 6th receiver on the depth chart.
Absolutely. It frames him as potentially solving a key strategic need for the offense. And you mentioned Cohen being hired to get the most out of Lawrence.
Yeah.
Well, having a reliable third option, someone who can win matchups when the top guys draw coverage, that directly helps the quarterback. It makes Lawrence's job easier. It makes the whole offense more efficient.
So the sources are painting a picture where Pankol isn't just having a good camp, he's potentially emerging as a key piece in their offensive puzzle for 2025.
That seems to be the implication based on his standout performance and the team's perceived needs. But
you have to pump the brakes a little, right? Remember the path he's on.
Exactly. We need to talk about the challenge, the reality of being an undrafted free agent.
The sources are very clear about this. They state OTAs are merely the first step. This is just the beginning of the journey.
It's so important to keep that perspective. Impressing in June in shorts and helmets is great. It gets you noticed, but it guarantees nothing.
And the road ahead for UDFAs, the sources describe it as a long and arduous climb that often ends in disappointment.
That's just the statistical reality. Most guys signed after the draft don't make the final 53-man roster. They might make the practice squad, which is still an achievement, but making the active roster is tough.
They're often brought in just to push the drafted guys, provide competition, fill out numbers for camp.
And even the ones who look good early, like Pankol apparently does, face a whole new level of competition when the veterans are fully engaged, the pads come on, and the hitting starts in training camp. The pressure ramps up significantly.
So the odds are still stacked against him, historically speaking.
Heavily stacked. But the sources don't just leave it there. Despite those odds, despite the tough road ahead.
Yeah. What's the optimistic take?
They circle back to Pankol specifically and say, yet Pankol has all the early signs of a hidden gem.
Hidden gem. That phrase again. What does that really mean in this context?
It reinforces that narrative we talked about. He was overlooked, maybe undervalued in the draft because of the injuries. But the underlying talent, the 4-star recruit potential, the speed, the playmaking ability, it's still there. And now that he's healthy, it's shining through.
So he's a gem because the Jaguars might have found legitimate talent and value without having to spend a draft pick, precisely because other teams were scared off by the injury history.
That's the idea, finding gold where others only saw risk. It connects right back to his backstory. The talent was likely always there, just needed health and opportunity.
And the sources wrap up this section by suggesting the current situation in Jacksonville might be particularly favorable for a guy like him to actually break through.
How so?
They state, if there is a time and place for an offensive rookie like him to break through, it is with Cohen and the Jaguars in 2025.
Okay, why? Why is this situation potentially better than others?
Well, the sources don't spell it out explicitly, but You can infer a few things. Maybe Cohen's offensive system is a really good fit for Pankel's skill set, that speed, the ability to work the middle they mentioned.
Scheme fit could be huge.
Plus, we already established that clear need for receiving depth behind Thomas and Hunter. There's a genuine opportunity for someone to step up and claim a role.
The door is open, so to speak.
And the fact that the team signed 6 UDFA receivers suggests they are actively looking, maybe even hoping, to find value outside the draft at that position. They seem open to giving guys like Pankol a real shot.
So it's a combination of factors. Potential scheme fit, clear roster need, and maybe a team philosophy willing to look closely at UDFAs. The sources see that as a potentially fertile ground for an underdog story like Pankol's to succeed.
Okay, let's try and synthesize all of this now. We've gone through his background, the injuries, the comeback, the impressive OTA performance, the team context. Let's pull the threads together and think about what this actually means for you, the listener, following this story.
Yeah, let's recap the journey as the sources laid it out.
Okay, so Eli Pank, story starts. Highly touted recruit, 4-star guy, definitely on the NFL radar early in college, expected to be a solid draft pick down the line.
Then boom, path gets completely derailed. Not one, but 2 devastating consecutive ankle breaks. Left, then right, brutal timing, brutal injuries.
Derails his college career, costs him development time, and crucially, leads many scouts and teams to basically write him off due to major durability concerns.
Despite that, he fights back, shows incredible resilience just to get back on the field, and when he does for his final senior season, he's productive. Leads Duke in catches, nearly 800 yards, becomes a preferred target, major factor on a winning team, shows the talent is still there when healthy.
But the injury history lingers. He goes undrafted in the 2025 NFL Draft, enters the league as a free agent, lumped in with 5 other UDFA receivers in Jacksonville, facing long odds and, according to the sources, low expectations.
But then, plot twist. Since hitting the practice field in Jacksonville for rookie camp and now OTAs, he has been, quote, nothing but impressive.
The sources emphasize the speed is real. That reported 4.3340. It's showing up, he looks quick and explosive, and critically, those devastating ankle injuries, they appear to be a thing of the past, at least based on how he's moving now.
And it's not just speed, he's reportedly showing much more, making eye-opening plays, athletic catches, getting big gains over the middle. He's being described as a playmaker, consistently impressive day after day.
He's doing this somewhat under the radar, with the main focus on Travis Hunter. But his performance is so strong, he's forcing people to face his direction, making noise in a quiet time.
And this is happening in a situation where the Jaguars, under a new offensive coach trying to elevate Trevor Lawrence, have a clear stated need for depth and potentially a reliable third target behind Brian Thomas Jr. and Hunter.
The sources connect these dots directly, suggesting Pankol isn't just competing for a final roster spot, but is the player standing out early as someone who could potentially fill that crucial WR3 role, describing him as a potential hidden gem and an even more valuable depth piece.
His stock, as John Shipley reportedly put it, is clearly pointing up despite the universal caveat that it's very, very early and the real tests, pads, training camp, preseason, are still to come.
Okay, so that's the story the sources tell. What does it all mean for you, the listener? Why should you care about an undrafted rookie receiver in Jacksonville in June?
Well, on one level, it's just a really compelling human story, isn't it? The classic underdog narrative, overcoming serious adversity. Those injuries could easily have ended his career. Perseverance, getting a second chance.
Totally. Everyone loves an underdog story, someone beating the odds.
And it's also a fascinating peek behind the curtain of NFL talent evaluation. It highlights how teams might find real value where others saw only risk. Pankol is potentially a prime example, based on these sources, of a team maybe capitalizing on talent that slipped through the draft cracks because of injury concerns that might be resolved now.
So if you follow the NFL, especially if you follow the Jaguars,
Eli Pank just went from being a complete unknown, just one name on a long list of UDFA signings, to arguably one of the most interesting storylines to track heading into training camp.
he's not just a guy anymore. The sources suggest he's a legitimate contender for a meaningful role, potentially a crucial one for their offense's success this year.
So if you're interested in watching player development unfold, seeing how guys overcome setbacks, or just the pure drama of roster battles, his situation is a perfect case study to follow, based purely on the information we've gone through today. He's undeniably put himself on the map this spring.
This kind of deep dive, really digging into the reports, connecting the dots between the background story and the current performance, understanding the team needs, That's what we try to do here, using the material you give us.
Yeah, looking beyond the headlines to find these more nuanced, interesting stories that are developing.
And based only on everything we've discussed from these sources about Eli Pank, the high expectations early, the devastating injuries being written off, the strong comeback going undrafted, and now this sudden impressive emergence in OTAs, where his stock is soaring and he's being talked about as a potential key piece.
It really does leave you with a provocative question, doesn't
What's
it?
the final thought you're left pondering from all this?
Well, given Pancall's specific journey, especially the reason he likely fell out of the draft, those significant injuries, his impressive performance now really makes you wonder, how much should past injuries dictate a player's future potential? And maybe more pointedly, are these early off-season periods, like OTAs, particularly valuable because they give teams a chance to really see guys post-recovery, potentially allowing them to capitalize on talent that was discounted in the draft, precisely because of health concerns that might no longer be relevant?
It's a fantastic question.
Yeah.
Are OTAs the proving ground where injury-discounted players can rewrite their narrative before the pads even come on? Is something to think about?
Definitely keep an eye on Eli Pank as training camp gets closer. That, as the sources stressed, will be the next big hurdle, the next major test for him, seeing if this translates when the physicality ramps up.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for sharing these sources with us. This was a really interesting deep dive.
Always enjoy digging into these stories.
We look forward to our next deep dive with your sources.